What is up, people? Welcome in to the Fantasy Football Smackdown. Week 1 football is finally here. Thursday Night Football is kicking off in a little over an hour here, and I got you covered with all your Week 1 starts and sits. Answer any questions that you guys have. I'm your host, Kyle August. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleMonth8. And my God, we made it, people. Through all the offseason, all the dynasty drafts, all the redraft leagues, all of draft season, injuries left and right already to kick it off. Football is just about to get kicked off here with the Cowboys. As you see, rocking my Cowboys jersey if you're watching on YouTube. And we got Cowboys and the Bucks, and then a full slate of games here in Week 1. So if you're watching live, I'll be covering my starts and sits for you for this week. I've one for each position, and they'll be taking any questions that you have. If you have any lineup decisions you're looking to make here, drop them in the chat. I'll get to all of them here right on the show. We already got Darren chiming in. Loyal listener, what's up, bro? Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. If you're listening on the podcast, appreciate you tuning in. We've had a full week here on the Warzone Network, and that's going to continue all season long. But if you want in on this live show, it's going to be dropping every Thursday, probably around this time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, a little bit before kickoff. Give us enough time to get the inactives in. And I'll be dropping my start sits here every single week and taking your questions live. So if you listen on the podcast, be sure to check me out over here on the YouTube every Thursday night. So real quick, before we dive into my favorite starts and sits for Week 1, a little programming note. Man, we're going to be bringing it here on the Warzone Network starting this upcoming Sunday. Every Sunday, Memphis is going to be doing a little pre-kickoff show. So if you want to get away from the mainstream, you can hang out with Memphis and probably a different cast of characters from the Warzone Network every week. We're going to be dropping in and out of there. I'll be on there for a little bit. That is going to kick off an hour and a half before the 1 o'clock game. So that would, if you do hashtag math, 11:30 Eastern time. So we're going to be 90 minutes. We're going to be covering all your start sit questions. If you have any trade questions, dynasty questions, bring them. Memphis is going to cover it all. Obviously, he's become a degenerate gambler. So we'll be covering those wagers as well, leading up all the way till kickoff. So that's going to be every Sunday here on the Smackdown. Be bringing you waiver wire shows, dropping every Tuesday morning to get you set with all the start sit ads. And then, like I mentioned, every Thursday here, live streaming with the start sits and your questions live, 7 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday before Thursday Night Football. And then YouTube only, I'll be dropping the waiver wire sniping show. If you've been following me for a while, waiver wire sniping is an article that I've written for a handful of years now. It's in essence a waiver wire look ahead, where you can snipe these players off of waivers for free over the weekend before kickoff and before they're featured on every freaking waiver wire article and show, including this one here, the following week. So that's just a strategy that I've really come to live by a lot. You can't really find too many little edges here and there. Nowadays, there's so much out there, so much content. Even the most casual fan can take advantage of those things. But this is something a little bit more unique. So like a little preview as an example, Ben Roethlisberger, somebody that's not highly owned right now. He has a tough Week 1 matchup at Buffalo, probably not started in a lot of places. But in Week 2, he has a home matchup against the Raiders and a Week 3 matchup at home against the Bengals. Those are two great matchups. I can almost guarantee you that Ben Roethlisberger is going to be featured as the quarterback ad many places next week. So we'll be talking about him and players like him on that waiver wire sniping show. Again, that's going to be YouTube only. So if you're listening on the podcast, if you're not already subscribed, head on over to YouTube, Dynasty Warzone, subscribe, hit that notifications button, and that waiver wire sniping show will be releasing Saturday mornings. So that and a ton more great content coming here on the network. You got the Big Bet, the Warzone, the DFS show dropping this season. So you're going to want to stay subscribed on your favorite podcast feed and also on YouTube, so you can check out the live shows as well. So looking forward to a great season. Before I get into the starts and sits, also want to mention, might notice no co-host, no Jake Ripp joining me here. Jake has had some changes to his professional life. His job has really taken up a ton more time. So unfortunately, he's going to have to step back just a bit. So I'm going to rope him in here as much as I can. But it'll be me and some guests here and there and just hanging out and keeping the show going here on the Fantasy Football Smackdown. So looking forward to a great season nonetheless. And appreciate Jake. Had a ton of fun recording with him. This is our first year together. And just had a blast. And hopefully you guys did as well and enjoyed those shows throughout the season. So with that being said, it's Week 1, man. And obviously no bye weeks to deal with. New injury right before recording this show. Gus Edwards goes down. Something in the water there in that running back room in Baltimore. So one thing I would, suggest is, if you didn't pick up Le'Veon Bell already, you can. They chose him over Devontae Freeman, who they also signed today to the practice squad. I will note that Freeman was in camp, so he's a little bit more prepared and ready to go. My guess is he'll get some playing time a little bit more early on, but don't lose track that Baltimore did choose Lev Bell over Freeman before signing him. So obviously Williams is the only remaining back there in Baltimore, so he's going to be your guy for week 1 against the Raiders. I'm okay rolling him out there if you're in a deeper league and you need to, but more than likely you have other starters that you drafted ahead of them that you don't need to push that button right away. But it's a decent matchup. So if you're in a bind and you need to start Williams for Baltimore up against the Raiders, that's on Monday night, you can do that. So only one Monday Night Football game this week, by the way, just Baltimore at Vegas. So everybody else can be rolling on Sunday. So hopefully that'll make our lives a little bit easier. Last big note here, if you haven't watched already on Twitter and keeping track, Austin Eckler owners, you might have a little bit of concern coming out of the gate here in week 1. He was limited in practice on Wednesday, did not practice today on Thursday. So take a look at his status going in, but that might be a player that you're not looking to play right away, which is disappointing because obviously it was an early round pick there. So I'm just pulling up the running back ownership right now over on Yahoo for those of you that lost Gus Edwards, which is really disappointing. Some guys that are available in at least 50% of leagues right now. J.D. McKissick, obviously that's a little bit more PPR. I like James White quite a bit. I like him more than McKissick. He's 32% owned. So for the season, that's a guy that I might look to take a shot on. Tevin Coleman's 29% owned. That's obviously a three-man backfield right now, but he might lead the way early on. And Tony Jones Jr., 19% owned. That's a guy that with Latavius Murray being cut in New Orleans, he could get some of the running downs work right away. So there's just a few names there if you want to take a look at off the wire that are a little bit owned, but not but pretty readily available. So just stinks. I know I had a draft just yesterday and had the decision to make between Robinson and Edwards, and I went back and forth while I was on the clock, and I just decided, Robinson was the way to go, and just got lucky. I mean, that's just what it is, man. So even all of us with best intentions waiting until the last minute to draft our teams, you still had this injury go down today with Gus Edwards. So that's just really disappointing. Was looking forward to seeing what he could do there in Baltimore, given the chance after the J.K. Dobbins injury, but we're not going to take a look at him this year, torn ACL. So all right. Jumping into the starts and sits. Again, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. I will get to them here live on the show. Otherwise, we're just going to roll through these. I got 8 players here. We're going to start with a quarterback. We got Kirk Cousins as my start of the week at QB. At Fantasy Pros, they have him at QB 15, but I have him at QB 12. He's going up against Cincinnati. They were pretty middle of the road as far as overall against quarterbacks last year, but they did give up 21 or more fantasy points in 7 of their 16 games. They played a lot of bad quarterbacks. So I'm definitely rolling out Cousins with confidence. Losing Irv Smith stinks. But I think he's a guy that I feel comfortable with out of the gate in week 1. His schedule, too, lines up really nice. Talked about this a lot, but at Cincy, at Arizona, Seattle the first 3 weeks. So he's a guy that if you add him right now, if he's your starter, you should be good to go for most of September. I would start him over Matthew Stafford. Matt Ryan's close, but I'd go ahead and roll with Cousins as well. And Trevor Lawrence in his opening start. I know it's against the Texans, but those are some guys that I would not be starting if Kirk Cousins either was available or on my roster. Sit at quarterback is it's Jameis Winston. I know he's not a guy that we were looking to start in 1 QB leagues, but even in Superflex, I might look to get away from him if I can. I have him outside my top 20. He is a really tough matchup against the Green Bay Packers, who gave up the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks last season. This game is, while New Orleans is technically the home team, they're not at home. They're playing in Jacksonville due to the hurricane that came through there just a few weeks ago. So this is a guy that I'm really low on, especially compared to consensus right now. So I would start guys like Sam Darnold against the Jets. That's a great matchup. Even Jimmy Garoppolo going up against the Lions in Detroit. That guy's readily available and somebody I would play in a super flex spot. And Tyrod Taylor, whenever he's out there, he adds that rushing ability. He's playing Jacksonville, which is a horrible defense. So I would start all 3 of those guys over Jameis this week, kind of see how it goes if you can. If you have that luxury, I would sit Jameis Winston against the Packers. Better days ahead, hopefully, for him at Carolina in week 2. So I like that matchup. We got start sit question coming in, so I'll just jump right into this one. Breck PF says, should I start Tyson Williams, Hollywood Brown, Pittman, or Claypool at the flex in full PPR? Williams is obviously going to see a lot more work here for the Baltimore Ravens now that he is the last man standing, literally. So he's definitely very intriguing. Got to love the matchup against the Raiders. For me, Hollywood Brown is just not really in contention yet. He's just not somebody, even especially in full PPR, I think his value takes a dip. Pittman is my favorite wide receiver for the Colts. They're going up against the Seattle Seahawks, but I'm just a little bit worried about that offense getting off to a little bit of a slower start with Carson Wentz under center, but not having really played yet. I know it's a system he's familiar with, but still got to have that chemistry with the receivers, and he just did not have the time to do that. So Pittman is somebody that you drafted as a flex option or a bench play. I'd keep him there for now, but I do think he's a guy that you'll be able to plug in to your lineups. And Claypool, man, we love the kid. Very tough matchup this week, and obviously PPR isn't his preferred format with Juju and Deontay getting a lot more of the targets there. So usually I'd roll Claypool, especially of those receivers. But for me, I don't have any problem with you taking Tyson Williams or Taysom Williams. I'm gonna have to figure out how to actually say his name now that he is relevant, as we joked about on this show just a few weeks ago when Dobbins went down. But I'm gonna go with Williams. I know it's full PPR and he's not gonna catch a lot of passes, but I think he has a pretty good shot at finding the end zone. The Raiders' run defense is not particularly great. They're dealing with some injuries as well. So I know it's PPR, so you generally lead with the receiver. I think Claypool is probably a little bit safer play on that front because of it being full PPR, but I would roll with Williams. I don't think it's too cute this early on in the season. I know I have some teams with Claypool on them where I have some better options, and I am going that route. So I do think that's an okay play there. So if you want to play it safe, I do think it's Claypool over those other receivers, but I would roll with Williams with the upside. So appreciate the question. Thank you, Breck. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I'm going to roll right on here. Oh, we got one here from Darren. Sermon or Jamal Williams PPR. We got 0.4 for rushing first downs and 0.1 for rushing attempts. So a little bit of added bonus there, even though it's PPR, a little bit of added bonus there on the rushes. But I'm going to go with Jamal Williams. I know Sermon, better days ahead for him, I think, in this offense, but really, I think that Williams is going to see a good amount of work throughout the season. I think that Swift is still my boy, and I think he's going to be great. And I love the fact that they're saying he's not on a pitch count or anything. He's going to be good to go. His touches should not be limited against San Francisco this week. But I think Williams, especially with it being PPR, he's going to see some receptions. He's going to be involved. And I think out of the gate, we could see a little bit more of a split 50-50 than we might see later on with the Detroit Lions. So I would go Jamal Williams, even with Swift a full go per the coaches. I would go with Williams over Sermon for right now. I think that San Francisco will just go ahead and lean on Mostert early on in the season. So even with those little bonuses, I'd still go with Williams, but Sermon's probably going to be your guy long-term. We got Ben chiming in. New haircut? No, this is just my hair falling out. Thank you for that. And not wearing a hat today. Barkley or Chase Edmonds? Bro, let's go, baby. I'm going Barkley. 65% of Barkley is better than Chase Edmonds. I like Chase Edmonds, but I think Barkley, things are looking good for him right now as far as getting some playing time. He might be a little limited, but I think he's going to be good to go. So I'm still going to roll with Barkley there. But that's a great segue. Ben didn't even know it because even though I'd start Barkley over Chase Edmonds, if you can find a way to get Chase Edmonds in your lineup, I like that play this week. He's actually my start at running back. Saquon for me is still up in that RB1 tier. He's top 12 for me. But Chase Edmonds is a guy that I have inside my top 24 this week at RB22. Fantasy Pros consensus has him as RB27. So he's more of a flex play for Fantasy Pros, but I would start Chase Edmonds with confidence this week. He's going up against the Titans defense that gave up the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. So I'm going to try to get Edmonds in my lineup wherever I have him. You probably drafted him as a flex, so you could just plug him in to where he was kind of projected for your team. But if you have a tough decision, maybe you have Williams, for Baltimore, maybe that's made it tough for you. But no, man, I'd roll with Edmonds in most places if you can get him in your lineup. Not all of us have those great dilemmas, Saquon or Chase Edmonds. Those are both great options for this week, even with Saquon being limited. But for Edmonds, for reference, I would start Chase Edmonds over Josh Jacobs in that Monday night game against Baltimore. I'd start him over Darrell Henderson against the Bears, also a primetime matchup. And I'd start him over Kareem Hunt, which his game script should lean towards him being involved in the passing game. But I think Edmonds is your play here against the Titans on Sunday. So I like Edmonds as a top 24 play this week in an RB2. Should be in your lineups in most places. Sit of the week at running back. Right now, man, we're just looking for bodies. It's hard to find a sit at the running back position a lot of times. But for me, I'll just preemptive strike here. I am concerned about Austin Eckler. If you have other options, it's week 1, no bye weeks, hopefully not too many injuries on your squad. If you can find a way to move Eckler out, unless we get a positive report, keep up with those. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with sitting Austin Eckler this week, which stinks to say. But I will also say that even if Eckler is completely out, I am not starting Justin Jackson against the Washington football team. This is a defense that gave up the second fewest fantasy points to running backs last season. They also were tied for second in the fewest rushing touchdowns allowed in the NFL. So even if Eckler is completely out, I am not starting Justin Jackson. And if Eckler is in, I'm still a little bit hesitant to start Eckler. Like if I have a good flex option, then I'm going to go ahead and just not risk it. I was going to pull up some of the running backs here for you guys to give you maybe some reference of where he would fall, because the Eckler news kind of just came out. But I would start Kareem Hunt over him if you need. If you're watching live, I would go ahead and just roll with Ronald Jones tonight. If you have that tough decision, I hope you don't. I hope you have some Sunday options in there. But I mean, it's definitely tough. Some of the names I referenced here that even if Eckler was out, I would play over Justin Jackson. I'd go with James White against Miami. I think with Mac Jones under center now, that backfield has become a lot more clear, that Harris should get the early downs work. And then James White should get the passing downs work. And hopefully that White is somebody that he leans on there. Jamal Williams mentioned earlier in the questions against San Francisco. I know Swift will be a full go per the coaches, but I still think Williams can see 10 to 12 touches. And that's going to be more valuable than what Jackson's going to get against a really, really tough defense, almost the toughest opponent you're going to face as a running back. And then actually, I'd go Tevin Coleman. This is a guy that was drafted in the late rounds. I know it's a 3-headed monster there for the Jets, but I'm going to say that he's the lead dog right now out of that backfield. And I like his matchup against the Carolina Panthers, who are pretty much a sieve to the running back position, or have been. We'll see if they've improved, but I would roll those low-end running backs over Justin Jackson, even if Austin Eckler is out, even if he's out. So we got Andrew Campy coming in here, watching the Cowboys delayed. Smart move. That's all right. I'm a DVR fan right here. Tonight I'm watching live though. But coming from down under, I understand. Should I sit AJ and G? That's a great question. The Aussie guys. I would start AJ, sit G. That's just my standard advice. So I appreciate that. And then Zeke's stat estimate for tonight. It's going to be a tough matchup. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're going to know whether I'm right or wrong right out of the gate. I think Zeke gets 65 rushing yards, and I'll give him another 30 through the air. So 95 total yards. And you know what? Give him a damn touchdown. Let's do this thing. So a solid night for Zeke. I'm starting him. I know he's not a top 5 running back this week, but he's a top 12 guy and a guy that I'm putting in my lineup. I know it's a tough matchup, but and especially without Zach Martin, that's a big thing. If you're not following closely, Zach Martin is out due to COVID. So that's a tough situation, but Lyle Collins is back. So that'll be one to watch. Let's move on to the receivers. Start this week. Again, it's week 1. So most of these guys that you're drafted as starters, those are guys you're going to play. You don't need to get crazy cute. But for this situation here, some guys that I would look to try to plug in my lineup if I had them are the Jacksonville Jags wide receivers of Marvin Jones and Shenault. Fantasy Pros has Jones at wide receiver 43 and Shenault at wide receiver 37. I think these are both fine flex options that you can get in your lineup. If you're really stuck, like I know I have a situation where I'm staring down Cortland Sutton and I'm just, he's coming back from the injury. It's a little bit of a tougher matchup and I want to kind of see it a little bit before I push him in there. I'm going to go with Marvin Jones in that situation there. So Houston gave up obviously a ton of points everywhere, but they gave up a lot of points to the wide receivers, 7th most last year. They have not improved. They just traded away probably their best corner. So I think that Jacksonville, this game's gonna be ugly, but I think this is a game that Jacksonville should get going in the passing game. And I would roll both those guys as solid flex options this week. Or if you're in a pinch, you get those guys in your lineup as low end 2s, but I have them right now. I have Jones at 31 and Shenault at 34. I have Shenault at 31, Jones at 34. So I would roll those guys in there as solid flex options. And those guys right now are outside the top 36 in Fantasy Pros rankings. So I'm good with those as flex options. My sit this week, maybe this is a little easy, but I did see where he was ranked over at Fantasy Pros and just want to make sure that it's very clear cut, even for week one. I'm setting Kenny Goliday. There's no reason to start this guy against a tough matchup. I know he's at home, but he's playing against Denver, who's done a great job with improving their secondary, spending a lot of draft capital, obviously, there at the corner position. And Galladay's been injured. I think he's going to be a little bit slow going. That offense is going to be one to keep an eye on with Barkley and Goliday, both maybe getting limited snaps right out of the gate. And with it being week one, you don't need to risk it. You'll have other options, especially if you drafted late. Goliday was being drafted, around 6 or 7, and you probably picked up better options to just start and plug in right away. So I'm going to go ahead and sit Kenny Goliday this week, pretty much across the board. I'd roll all the Jacksonville wide receivers, to be honest. I know I mentioned Jones and Shenault. Even Chark for me, I'd go. I know he's been dealing with an injury, but that's been, the finger should be good to go for Chark. I'd go ahead and just take a piece against the Texans over Kenny G. Jarvis Landry, another guy that's being ranked behind Goliday right now over at Fantasy Pros. I'd start him in a matchup that should see Cleveland throw the ball quite a bit going up against Kansas City. And then all the Cincinnati Bengals wide receivers. Now, obviously, I think Higgins is a slam dunk over Kenny G every week, but Boyd and even Jamar Chase in his first game, I would roll all those guys over Kenny Goliday. I got a bonus sit as well at the wide receiver position. It's kind of linked to my quarterback sit, but Marquez Calloway. It's a really tough matchup against Alexander and the Green Bay Packers. I'm a little bit hesitant to trust this offense right away. And I think better days ahead for Callaway. Hopefully you drafted him again as a bench player with some nice upside, but not in week one. You can find better options there. So there's a little bonus sit for you guys. And we'll wrap this one up with the tight end position. My start of the week at tight end, he's only owned in 53% of Yahoo leagues. So this is a guy that you could go grab right now. I'm starting him over some pretty decent names that you probably drafted. But I'm going with Austin Hooper at Kansas City. This game is the over-under is 54.5. So that is the highest of the week. There are going to be points put up. And yeah, Kansas City, might put up 30 of them, but that still leaves another 24.5 for your Cleveland Browns. So I think with OBJ working his way back, shout out to Neil, is that Hooper, there's been talks about him getting more involved this season compared to last year after they gave him the bag. And I think this year you could see Hooper have a pretty decent year overall as a low-end tight end one option. But right out of the gate here, I have Hooper as a top 12 tight end in week one. I would start him over Tyler Higbee. That one's close, but I'd start him over Higbee. I'd start him over Jonnu Smith and Mike Gesicki. So I would, some of those guys, especially Higbee and Jonnu, I'd prefer to have them on my roster and just go ahead and start them like they're still close. I'd still prefer to have those guys on my roster long-term. If I had to make the decision either or, but if you have an extra roster spot and you want to throw in Hooper, you can do that. I had a question here, over Noah Fant, Austin Hooper over Noah Fant. I'd still go with Noah Fant. I was really high on Noah Fant in the preseason. I think he can produce, at a mid tight end one level throughout the year. And I think he has just a little bit more upside. So I like Hooper. It's closer than it was draft season. That is for sure. But I'd still roll Noah Fant. So if Austin Hooper's available and you have an extra roster spot, if you have a lower end option that you're not as comfortable with this week, I think Hooper is a great week one stream. And then sit this week. I went with Gerald Everett. He's not ranked very high over at Fantasy Pro, so I'm not sure that he's like an auto starter or anything. But he is a guy that was drafted as a streamer. I would pivot away from him to Hooper if you can. He's going up against Indy, who gave up a grand total of 3 touchdowns to tight ends last year. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a low scoring game. I think that Colts defense is pretty solid. So for now, there's a lot of tight ends that are sits, but I'll go with Gerald Everett. He's a guy that I like longer term as a streamer, but for now I kind of want to see how he fits in that offense just a bit. And there's no reason to force it with this tough matchup. So we got a follow-up question. Would you start Lamb over Allen Robinson this week? Tough matchups for sure. And this is obviously a question that we're coming up right against here. You're going to have Allen Robinson going up against the Rams and Jalen Ramsey. And that is the situation where both teams, the Cowboys and the Bears, will probably be playing from behind. As much as I do think the Cowboys will keep it close tonight, Tampa is obviously the defending champs. But I'm going to go with Lamb. You're leaning Lamb here. So would I. I just think that I'm a little bit more confident in that offense to be able to move the ball right now. And I think CeeDee Lamb's in for a really big season. So both those guys are obviously great options. You'd need some pretty serious options to not start Allen Robinson in your lineup. But if it really comes down to those two, I would lean CeeDee Lamb. And we got Ace here. Dak going to kill it tonight. Need him healthy all year. Yes, I need him healthy all year as well. I cannot take a year of Cooper Rush or a poor offense like we saw in 2020 from the Dallas Cowboys. Dak is still a solid start for me tonight. I think this will probably be his worst game, to be honest, of the year. But there's nobody I'm streaming over him. Nobody that was taken, outside the top 10, even if you doubled up on quarterback, that I would start over Dak Prescott. Game script should lean to him throwing the ball quite a bit. I know his over-under, I think, on passing yards was like 350. He'll probably get around there. So I think he's going to have a really good week one right out of the gate. Just not the top 5 performance where you probably drafted him. Better weeks ahead for Dak for sure. This is just a tough matchup out of the gate. So, all right. Well, that about does it. We're at about half an hour here. Depending on the questions and things, this show might go a little longer. Obviously, week 1 is fairly straightforward as far as starts and sits go. I feel like we've had a lot of running back situations change over the last few weeks here. So hopefully you guys found that helpful. I'll probably be bringing a couple extra starts and sits as we get further along into the season, as we have some tougher decisions to make, and as bye weeks roll around for sure. We'll dive into that. But again, every Thursday night, it's going to be 7 p.m. I always have to calculate it. 7 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Central time, where I'm at. Every week before Thursday Night Football, going to be do about 30, 40 minutes of start sits and answering your questions. So we got a few more coming in here, actually. So I'll take care of these as we sign off. Darren came back here. Hawkinson or Higbee, tight end premium, 1.5. I'm rolling Hawk, baby. He's going to be a beast. No reason to steer away from him. Number 1 target in that offense. I'm a little bit lower on Higbee this week, his matchup against the Bears. So in tight end premium, Higbee is definitely valuable. And somebody that you definitely want on your roster. But Hawkinson, man, he's the man. No reason to steer away from him this week. I know San Fran's a little bit healthier, but Hawkinson is going to get peppered, bro. So you should be good to go with Hawkinson in your lineup. And then Breck's back for another one here. We're going defense, man. Oh, man, you hit the specialty, DSTs. I successfully made it with only 2 leagues out of 24 that had DSTs and kickers. So I'm almost there. But don't worry, I'll help you out here. You got Seattle, so they're going to be on the road. So the question here is Seattle, Minnesota, or Carolina. So you got Seattle is going to be on the road against the Colts and Carson Wentz having not played a snap all preseason. Minnesota on the road against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. So obviously some opportunities for sacks there. I think Minnesota's defense is going to be pretty solid this year. Or Carolina's defense, a great matchup against the Jets, but that defensive unit's pretty bad. I would go with Minnesota. I know it's on the road, and Cincinnati should put up some points, but I think there's going to be some turnovers along the way. I think there's definitely going to be some sacks to be had. Carolina has my favorite matchup going up against the rookie quarterback in his first start, but I don't really have much faith in that Carolina defensive unit. And at a certain point, the defense has to be at least half decent for me to trust them, even in the best matchups there. So if you can only choose one, I would go with Minnesota. I was taking a look maybe a week out as well. You're probably, if you're streaming and those are your streaming options, you're probably going to be looking somewhere else, even amongst those defenses for week 2. Seattle plays Tennessee. That's obviously a great defense, even though that's going to be in Seattle week 2. And then Minnesota gets the Cardinals, not another offense you're not going to want to go up against. So if you ever have any close decisions, whether it's DST, quarterback, tight end, and you're streaming, if they're super, super close and you can only roster one, usually my tiebreaker is whoever has the better matchup the next week. That's the guy I want on my team. So that way I don't have to fight for them off the wire. So again, thinking ahead just a little bit. And that's what you're going to get too on waiver wire sniping. So that's going to be a YouTube only show. So if you're looking for it in your podcast feed, you got to check us out on YouTube, subscribe. That's going to be there Saturday morning. Week 1's going to drop this Saturday morning. I'm going to cover players that you need to add for every position that are readily available. You can add for free before kickoff week 1. So with that, appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you for all the questions. Going to be back here again, 7 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday before Thursday Night Football kickoff. Appreciate you guys. I will be back later in the week. Enjoy the game. Football's back. Let's go. Good luck week 1.